Hello there, welcome to Planet America's Situation Room. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello, and once again, we've got a situation.
The nationwide protests against his administration's policies. President Trump's military parade through the nation's capital.
News out of Minnesota right now, where 2 Democratic state lawmakers have been shot.
This was an act of targeted political violence.
Millions protest in No Kings rallies as Trump gets a military parade, and a politician and her husband are gunned down in their own home.
And the conflict between Israel and Iran has seen another conflict erupt within Trump's own MAGA movement. But first...
This week, politically motivated violence returned to America.
2 Democratic state lawmakers and at least 1 other person were shot in what appears to be targeted shooting. State Representative Melissa Hortman and State Senator John Hoffman.
Senator Hoffman and his wife Yvette were shot and wounded when they answered a knock at the door in the early hours of Saturday morning. He was hit 9 times. She suffered 8 gunshot wounds, allegedly inflicted by a man posing as a police officer. But Representative Melissa Hortman wasn't so lucky. When police went to check on her home a short time after the first shooting, they found Hortman and her husband Mark dead as their assassin fled the scene on foot. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz was in no doubt these shootings were politically motivated.
This was an act of targeted political violence. Peaceful discourse is the foundation of our democracy. We don't settle our differences with violence or at gunpoint.
That is the hope, of course, but the current reality is quite different. This is just the latest in a growing number of attacks targeting judges, business executives, foreign diplomats and politicians in America, including Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania and, of course, Donald Trump, who condemned the attacks.
Absolutely terrible, and they're looking for that particular man right now.
And police quickly identified their suspect, Vance Luther Belter, a 57-year-old male.
Early Saturday, police officers encountered the suspect outside the Hortman home when they say he opened fire and got away on foot. Investigators towed a vehicle they believe he used disguised with police lights and markings. They say inside they found No Kings flyers and a list of 50 potential targets, including abortion rights advocates, abortion facilities, and other officials outside Minnesota.
And by Sunday night, after the largest manhunt in Minnesota's history, Belter was in custody. An FBI affidavit says that he later confessed in a written note. Belter's facing state and federal murder charges, the latter carrying the potential for a death penalty, Chaz.
Judging from the online reaction, though, John, people were less concerned about the return of political violence to America and more about whether that violence could be exploited for political purposes. First out of the gate was the right. They made 3 quick observations. Firstly, the shooter was appointed to the Minnesota Governor's Workforce Development Board in 2019 by Tim Walz and to the Governor's Workforce Development Council in 2016 by another Democratic governor, Mark Dayton. Secondly, the right noted those No Kings banners left in his car as if he might be intending to attend the protest. And thirdly, the week before Hortman was shot dead, she did this.
Hortman was the lone DFL lawmaker to cast a vote to cut Minnesota Care access for undocumented immigrants. It's a move she made with a heavy heart.
I did what leaders do. I stepped up and I got the job done for the people of Minnesota.
And that was enough for prolific MAGA influencers to concoct a half-baked theory about a revenge killing against a Democratic turncoat. Some of them started calling for Tim Walz's resignation as if he was tied up in it. Some even questioned whether Walz himself had ordered a hit job on that Democratic state legislator who voted against his agenda. Well, no, he didn't do that. Firstly, that tough vote of Hortman's was so Walz's budget deal could pass. Secondly, the other guy who was shot, State Senator Hoffman, he voted against that bill. So that explanation makes no sense whatsoever. As for the shooter supposedly being a Democrat because he was appointed by Walz, he was appointed to one of hundreds of non-political local business boards. It had 41 members. Also, when Walz reappointed the shooter to the board, his political affiliation was listed as having no party preference. So not exactly a smoking gun. Those No Kings banners, they could have been anything. Maybe he was intending to shoot one of the victims at a rally. Anyway, that was all within a few hours after news of the shooting first broke. Then we started seeing thoughts from the other side. The gunman had left a notebook behind with a list of names of his targets, about 70 names. All the lawmakers on it seemed to be Democrats, including Tim Walz himself. But there were also doctors, community and business leaders, and locations for Planned Parenthood and other healthcare centres on that list. At that point, some people started to theorise there might be a connection to the abortion issue. The shooter had also been a preacher. Some of his old speeches were dug up and they sounded kind of conservative.
There's people, especially in America, they don't know what sex they are. They don't know how their sexual orientation. They're confused.
And while Minnesota's voter registrations don't list your party, the shooter had previously registered in Oklahoma as a Republican. And the man who claimed to be his roommate and lifelong best friend was in no doubt as to the shooter's politics.
Well, everyone's calling him a Democrat. He's not a Democrat. He would be offended if people called him a Democrat. Oh, he's a Trump supporter. Voted for Trump. You like Trump? I like Trump.
So now we're hearing a lot about Trump and MAGA rhetoric. But look, I'm not going to be jumping to conclusions here because we still don't know what the shooter's motivations were. Everything I just said might be irrelevant. Maybe he had personal reasons. Maybe he's just a nut. We'll find out eventually. What we don't want to be is like US Senator Mike Lee, who tweeted out soon after the event, "This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way." Now, we should say that Mike Lee has finally deleted that tweet.
Took a while.
Yeah, only after being shamed for 3 straight days. Once again, do not be like Mike Lee.
Sage advice, Chaz. And let's also note as well, while President Trump did describe the shooting as quite terrible and declared such horrific violence will not be tolerated in the United States of America, he did not mention Melissa and Mark Hortman. He said nothing about their orphaned children. He did not send best wishes to the Hoffmans. He even refused to call Governor Tim Walz.
I think the governor of Minnesota is so whacked out. I'm not calling. Why would I call him? I could call him and say, "Hi, how you doing?" The guy doesn't have a clue. He's a mess.
Well, for more, we're joined by Steve Simon. He is the Minnesota Secretary of State. Secretary Simon, thank you for being with us on Planet America. I know that Melissa and Mark Hortman were more than colleagues, they were personal friends of yours. Would you mind starting by telling us a little bit about them both?
Well, I knew Melissa Hortman for over 30 years. She and I went to law school together. We ran for office at the same time, winning our elections to the Minnesota State House of Representatives the same year, which means we learned everything together, came up together, collaborated on many things together. She and her husband, Mark, also killed, attended my wedding. This is someone I've known for a long time and counted as a good friend. And she was just a bright, shining light of a human being. And when I think about all her many qualities, what really strikes me and has always struck me is she was the living embodiment of the idea that you can be a steely negotiator, you can be tough, you can be shrewd and savvy and all the rest, and at the same time, you can be warm, you can be human, you can see the humanity in others. She accomplished both of those sets of things, and that's why she was so well regarded.
It seemed like online there was a rush to score political points about which side is more to blame for the killings. Has that happened in Minnesota as well, or has the reaction there been generally different?
It's generally been different, but unfortunately there are enough loud outliers to make a difference and get attention. And I have strong feelings on that subject. And my feeling is that if we want to help solve the problem of political violence, the way to do it, the best way to do it, is for all the various political camps to increasingly police their own. You know, it costs nothing. It is not brave in the least for someone in one political party to call out inflammatory speech or action or violence in the other political party. That's an easy one. There's no cost to that. What's a lot tougher, a lot more difficult, is to call it out in your own camp. Now, I'm not suggesting that people even do it publicly. They don't have to post anything on social media. They don't have to hold a press conference. They don't have to make it loud. But even if it's quietly and even if it's behind the scenes, policing their own is going to be increasingly important. Because after all, if someone in one political party wags a finger in the face of someone in the other political party, it's not likely to have a real effect on solving the problem. But if someone within their own camp quietly does that, it can over time have an effect. Look, I'm not naive. I'm not saying this particular case of horrible politically inspired murder and violence could have been averted by any one particular action. But over time, I think the way we're going to get somewhere is by having the individual political camps or tribes or groupings really police their own, and not using episodes like this to engage in some sort of political violence scorekeeping, where we keep rigid track of how many left-wing kooks kill people and how many right-wing crazy people kill people, because that ultimately is a dead end. It may be interesting, it may be worth doing for other reasons. It raises awareness, it might win elections. But if what we're after is solving the actual problem of political violence, I don't think that strategy is going to do us much good. It's about self-policing, and in the end, that can have an effect. Other things will too, but I think that can have a real effect.
I wonder, do you expect violence like this will have a chilling effect on the kinds of votes that politicians will be prepared to take, issues they'll be prepared to deal with, or even whether people want to become politicians in the future?
All of the above. And the last one you mentioned is one that I'm particularly concerned about, because it takes a lot of talent to populate a legislative body anywhere in the world. And if people of talent on all portions of the political spectrum are intimidated and recoil at the prospect of running for office because they don't want to put themselves and their families at risk of bodily harm or possibly death, that's going to have a real impact. And that will be a real waste of talent, wherever it is, in our country, in your country, anywhere. So I worry about that. I also worry about intimidation of those who are already elected, people who might not want to take on certain projects or take on certain issues because they're worried that it will somehow inflame others to take matters into their own hands in a violent way. This is corrosive, it is toxic, it is poisonous to our democracy in Minnesota, in the United States, and elsewhere. And that's why we really need to focus on this problem of politically inspired violence. There's no one solution. I've suggested one or two, but it's something we have to focus on because it is an issue. And I don't pretend to have compiled it in any detailed way, but it sure seems to me in the last decade, we've seen a real uptick in politically motivated violence, including murder.
Finally, Mr. Secretary, do you have any idea how we could possibly increase empathy in politics? Is there something that the media or politicians could do to increase empathy?
I've thought about this. I think the news media, that I think generally, I assume in Australia and in the United States, many are trying to get their arms around this problem. But I mean, one thing is to simply ask office holders or opinion leaders or others, why do you think they think the way they do? They meaning someone on the other side. Or what would they say if they were here? What would their argument be? And push people to faithfully express an argument that they don't like. That's something that over time can bend the arc just a little bit. I mean, again, I'm not pretending that that's the one and only thing that's going to solve all of our problems, but that's something from a media standpoint that I think would be helpful. See if someone has the sort of mental strength to faithfully describe another's argument. You can then poke all the holes you want in it. You can criticize it. You can attack it. You can demonize the idea, not the person, but the idea. But see if they can do that. Do they have the mental bandwidth to actually faithfully explain on the air somebody else's idea?
Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon, thank you for joining us on Planet America this week.
Thanks for having me.
Right now, it's kind of hard to know what to make of the Trump administration's role in the Israeli attacks on Iran. The American president's comments have been contradictory, to say the least. During a call between President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu before the strikes began last week, Trump reportedly said that Israel should end the war in Gaza and stop talk of an attack on Iran. Trump said he did not want Israel going in because it would blow an agreement with Iran over its nuclear program, which Trump said was fairly close. But then, after the bombs and missiles started flying,
President Trump is calling those Israeli strikes excellent, saying he gave Iran the chance to make a deal and they, quote, got hit about as hard as you're going to get hit, adding there's more to come, a lot more.
Well, he was right about that. Meanwhile, Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth directed the deployment of additional capabilities to the Middle East, including the aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz. Talk then started of American bunker buster bombs maybe being used to knock out Iran's alleged underground nuclear weapons site. Still, before leaving the G7 meeting in Alberta, Canada, a day early yesterday, Trump was still talking up the prospects of an agreement with Iran.
Iran should have signed the deal.
If it would help bring Iran to the negotiating table, would you guarantee that the U.S. would not get involved militarily?
Well, I think Iran basically is at the negotiating table. They want to make a deal. And as soon as I leave here, we're going to be doing something. But I have to leave here. I have, this commitment. I have a lot of commitments. I have a commitment to a lot of countries.
But by the time President Trump arrived back in Washington, D.C., he was issuing increasingly dire warnings to Iran via social media, claiming, "We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran," seeming to imply that America and Israel are now we. Then came, "We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. We are not going to take him out, kill, at least not for now," then demanding Iran's unconditional surrender. It's fair to say that Donald Trump has been on a bit of a journey this week, Chaz.
Yeah, and a number of supporters have been on their own journeys as well, John. Tucker Carlson was sounding alarm bells even before Israel attacked Iran, saying 2 weeks ago that Trump ran for president as a peace candidate. That's what made him different from conventional Republicans. It's why he won. A war with Iran would amount to a profound betrayal of his supporters. It would end his presidency. That might explain why so many of Trump's enemies are advocating for it. Then, after the actual war began, Carlson seemed to question Trump's own America First bona fides, writing, "Politicians purporting to be America First can't now credibly turn around and say they had nothing to do with it. Our country is in deep." And Trump, in response, said he defines America First, saying, "Well, considering I'm the one that developed America First and considering the term wasn't used until I came along, I think I'm the one that decides that." For the record, Trump did rip the term America First off previous politicians. But regardless, it is true that Trump has continued to advocate for a peace deal.
They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
And he does insist this is not about regime change.
Mr. President, do you want to see regime change in Iran?
I want to see no nuclear weapon.
He hasn't been helped, though, by the obvious enthusiasm from his more hawkish supporters, like Lindsey Graham tweeting on day one of the war, "Game on. Pray for Israel." Trump also hasn't been helped by his own Director of National Intelligence testifying only a few months back that Iran is not building a nuclear bomb.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003.
Israel, of course, has a different view, claiming that Iran was weeks away from being able to produce a bomb if it chose to do so. And Trump clearly believed Israel when he was asked about Gabbard's testimony against an Iran nuclear bomb. Trump said, "I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having it." Meanwhile, Netanyahu tried to MAGA up his message as much as he could.
I understand America first. I don't understand America dead. That's what these people want. They chant death to America.
But the internal MAGA dissent really started bubbling over after Trump then tweeted out that everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. And then Trump struck back.
You responded to Tucker Carlson criticizing you, saying that you were complicit in the war.
I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go get a television network and say it so that people listen.
Ouch. And he followed that up with, "Someone please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon." And then it was on. Alex Jones tweeted, "Trump attacking Tucker Carlson for not supporting a new world war is not something any sane person should support. This is the stuff nightmares are made of. Matt Gaetz tried to give Trump an out by blaming Netanyahu.
I'm old enough to remember the last time Israel coaxed the United States into a regime change war in the Middle East. Listen to now Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu tell us in 2002 that invading Iraq would be a good choice.
It's not a question of whether Iraq's regime should be taken out, but when should it be taken out? I think the choice of Iraq is a good choice. It's the right choice.
No, actually, it was a terrible decision to invade Iraq.
But Joe Rogan intellectual and comedian Dave Smith was not having any of it.
Donald Trump looks, and man, I supported him this last year. I apologize for doing so. It was a bad calculation. At the time, it seemed like the right one. But he should be impeached and removed for this one. All of his supporters should turn on him. It's the absolute betrayal of everything that he ran and campaigned on and everything that he stood for.
And that was when the administration trotted out noted non-interventionist J.D. Vance to defend Trump. Interestingly, while not criticising Tucker Carlson, Vance wrote that he believed the president has earned some trust on this issue. He's only interested in using the American military to accomplish the American people's goals. But John, will that be enough?
Watch this space. Saturday night in America provided an extraordinary split screen, in many ways summing up a lot about this present moment. Just as President Trump's military parade was rumbling through the streets of Washington, D.C., half an hour early and in quick time to get ahead of a forecast summer rain and storm, over on the West Coast, protesters against Trump's deportation efforts were being hit with tear gas and less lethal rounds.
Leave the area!
Pushing the crowds out of downtown Los Angeles were LA police officers, not the thousands of military troops from the National Guard and the US Marine Corps deployed by President Trump against the wishes of local authorities last week.
Now, this is the scene right now. This was, of course, first they had the immigration demonstrations that have been going on for a week now, but you also have, on top of that, tens of thousands of people gathering downtown for the No King's Day protest. So the city of Los Angeles is now dealing with two protests at once.
In fact, around 2,000 demonstrations were held in all 50 states last Saturday under the banner of No Kings, opposing what they see as the authoritarian tendencies of the current American president.
I'm standing right in front of Fifth Avenue, the same Fifth Avenue where President Donald Trump said that he could famously shoot somebody and get away with it. Right now, there are over 100,000 people filmed that same street saying that they want no kings in their government.
Meanwhile, the president was sitting, sometimes standing, occasionally saluting, but mostly kind of slumping behind bulletproof glass on a specially erected reviewing platform fronted by a pair of parked tanks. All as a parade celebrating 250 years of the American Army passed him by. From a cosplay George Washington to Civil War troops, thankfully all Union, no Confederates, doughboys from America's belated but decisive appearance in World War I, then their proudest moment perhaps, World War II, followed quickly by a bunch of other wars that they kind of glossed over because they didn't end quite as America would have liked. And then it was on to the present day and the future. It was less Soviet-era May Day parade than some might have feared, more military trade show meets Civil War reenactment perhaps. President Trump was more than an idle spectator though. He swore in new army members who pledged their allegiance to the Constitution and him.
And that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States.
Of course, this event happened, Chaz, on the president's own 79th birthday, although he maintained it wasn't about him and he mostly kept a lid on the politics, apart from a few video inserts celebrating him at least as much as the military. And then, of course, the commander-in-chief, who dodged the draft in Vietnam with a dubious claim of bone spurs, seemed to pay the American Army the highest compliment he could possibly imagine. They're a lot like him.
Because our soldiers never give up, never surrender, and never, ever quit. They fight, 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 and they win, win, win.
And he also got Lee Greenwood out there to sing his ubiquitous campaign song in a jacket apparently designed to help people tune their TV sets. And Lee sure wasn't forgetting that this was a double celebration.
God bless the USA. Happy birthday, Mr. President.
And then, as the sun slowly set, it was time to blow some things up. And of course, as all of that was happening, some very real missiles were being fired from Iran into Israel, and very real flashbang grenades were being thrown at crowds of protesters who were fleeing police in Los Angeles. The juxtaposition, pretty striking.
It was, but at least the parade was apparently held with a positive atmosphere, even according to MSNBC.
There's a very different mood here. People seem to be going out of their way to say that they're here to celebrate the Army's 250th birthday. So there's some politicization here, but it is not. It's not dark. It's not tense. It's not amped up. It's different.
It was friendly, but maybe it didn't quite have the majesty of other parades, though. Now, that was obviously showcasing the older vehicles, but even the more modern tech wasn't exactly wowing the crowd on the day. Fox's Lawrence Jones did his best to hype it all up.
There is no doubt in my mind that this will go down in history as the moment that lit a match in this country. I'm just excited.
Maybe, but I'm not sure Marco Rubio was quite as excited. I don't know if that's a sigh or a yawn, but it wasn't good. So maybe in the end, Trump did get what was advertised. He got a family-friendly tribute to the Army, but not so much what he wanted, which was a huge spectacle. Meanwhile, the most noteworthy aspect of the No Kings protest was its size. It was huge. According to organisers, over 2,100 events were held. According to the data site Strength in Numbers, about 40% of the events added up to about 2.6 million attendees. So their overall estimate was somewhere between 4 and 6 million attendees in total. And those were just the latest in a series of protests this year, John. The Crowd Counting Consortium has been tracking protests since 2017. These were the numbers of protests in Trump's first 150 days back then. These are the numbers of protests in his first 150 days now. I was surprised to see how many more there are. I guess protests don't get covered by the media so much these days, maybe. The other interesting element of the No Kings protest was how little violence there was, I thought. You already mentioned the clashes between the protesters and police in LA. Also in Portland, a mob launched fireworks, smoke grenades and threw rocks at law enforcement as they broke into an ICE facility and injured 4 officers. But look, given the huge numbers of protesters on the day and the tension at the moment, to me that's surprisingly little violence. All up, I actually think the worst fears about both the protests and the parade remained unrealised.
Yeah, you're probably right. One of the other strange elements, though, of Trump's military parade was the corporate sponsorship.
Special thanks to our sponsor, Form Energy. Special thanks to our sponsor, Oracle. Our sponsor, Coinbase. Lockheed Martin. UFC. Palantir. A special thanks to Scott's Miracle Grow and all of the terrific America 250 sponsors.
So, it now appears you can sponsor the American military. Just imagine the potential of that.
Every day, thousands of young American-made weapons are kept locked up without access to the things they need to realize their potential, like schools and hospitals. But you can make a difference by becoming a World Division missile sponsor. For just $1 a day, you could help Derek here fulfill his dreams of one day changing the world. Each month, your sponsored missile will send you an update on how your money is making a difference. Or just keep informed by joining Pete Hegseth's Signal Chat. Call now, and you could even sponsor a robot dog and help keep an entire village warm at night. It only costs $1 a day. Military contractors may actually charge you $75,000 a day. And with your support, every U.S.-made missile can be put into a home, probably somewhere in the Middle East.
And that is all for another trip to Planet America. We'll be back here at the same time next week.
And you can catch Planet America's Weekend Edition on Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on ABC News. See you.
Bye-bye.